Good morning. My name is David King. I'm the Chairman and CEO and one of the co-founders of AirTight Networks. I want to offer a warm welcome to all the delegates from Wireless Field Day 5 who are here in person, as well as to all the folks who are watching us live over the internet, and for the many, many who will watch us on a recorded basis. I want to thank everybody for participating today. It's indeed a great honor for AirTight to participate in its first Wireless Field Day, and will hopefully be many, many appearances to come. The Wireless Field Day 5 visit today is a very auspicious event for AirTight, as we have recently moved into the wireless LAN access market. And it's also a very serendipitous day for me personally. 20 years ago, literally this week, I took over a company, my first gig as a CEO, in a building right across the way here, a little company called Proxim, which was a pioneer and one of the early leaders in the field of wireless LANs, back in the days when nobody could spell WLAN. And I happened to take that company public by the end of 1993, believe it or not. Even though the industry was only about an $80 million industry, and just emerging at the time, we were a very small but ultimately successful growing public company for about 8 years under my leadership. So back in those days, way back when, 20 years ago, we were trying to move the industry from speeds of about 100 kilobits per second using direct sequence spread spectrum radios to a megabit per second or 2 megabits per second. And at the time, the IEEE began to codify standards, and they embraced 3 different physical layers, as you all know: direct sequence, a new technology called frequency hopping, as well as infrared, believe it or not, in the original 802.11 spec. And there was a real religious war underway at that time between the proponents of direct sequence, where Proxim and others had started, and those of us like Proxim and Symbol Technologies, which eventually became Motorola, that were advocating the move towards frequency hopping. And I remember distinctly, leading technologists of the day told us, the limit to the technology will be about 1 to 2 megabits per second, because of the limitations in the FCC regulations on spreading gain for direct sequence systems and 1 megahertz channels for frequency hopping systems. The theory was that you could never really push the modulation past QPSK for DS or 4-level FSK for frequency hopping systems. And therefore, 1 to 2 megabits per second was going to be about it, and that was the big fight in the standards body, was which physical layer was going to win, and which data rate was going to win, 1 megabit per second or 2 megabits per second. And why is that important? Because at the time, the industries we were serving with our DS radio modem modules were essentially barcode data collection devices. That's why folks like Symbol, which became Motorola, Telzon, which spun out Aeronet eventually, that Cisco bought for its first FAT-AP generation of WLAN technology. Those applications were really the bread and butter: retail, warehousing, manufacturing, transportation. There were some other niche devices, telemetry, medical devices that you could wheel around in a cart at the time. And that's why it was a small industry, under $100 million. Now, to spin forward to today, we all know what happened. The FCC relaxed some of its regulations, allowed DS systems using CCK modulation to get to 11 megs per second, which became the 802.11b standard. Frequency hopping systems also got to 10 when they upped the channel bandwidth to 5 megahertz for FH systems. And the industry really began to find its roots really at that time. In the early days, it was all about industrial devices and a new generation of devices called laptops. And so the theory was that at 1 or 2 megabits per second, that was adequate speed to extend the range of an Ethernet for these new portable devices that might be able to be taken around office environments or college campuses, to get it more horizontal, if you will. Well, all of that, of course, happened. And then, of course, we went through the 802.11ag generation with OFDM and 54 megabits per second. As you all know, we eventually got to MIMO, .11n and now .11ac, where first was 64 QAM and now 256 QAM. We're up all the way, past 150 megabits per second, all the way to 500 and gig links in this new generation standard. Amazing progress in 20 years. And what's happened in the industry? We've seen the industry go from this sub $100 million market when I took Proxim public to literally almost a $10 billion industry today. About $4 billion in the enterprise space this year, about $3.5 to $4 billion in the consumer residential space. Huge industry today. About a dozen players in each of those markets. And as you really look forward, you can see the trends are very, very clear. Not only have the speeds increased, prices come down, literally every consumer and business device on the planet has a Wi-Fi chip built into it. So this notion of extending Ethernet to just portable devices has given way to Wi-Fi fundamentally being the first hop onto any network, right? Obviously, you have 3G, 4G over the top for wide area communications, especially for voice and certain mobile applications. But WLAN really is now the ubiquitous technology that we posited when I took Proxim public back in 1993. It's truly gratifying to see that. Now, it's gotten to the point where we have true experts throughout the world today on Wi-Fi, including many of the folks in this room and watching us over the internet live. And so it's even gotten to the point where it's entered our social consciousness, where I don't know if you saw this Dilbert cartoon from, I don't know if you see the date, it was August 6th, just 2 days ago, as the delegates were probably just beginning to travel here for WFD5. But it's even entered the social consciousness of every population. Everybody knows what Wi-Fi is. So as somebody who did an IPO roadshow and had to explain at WLAN and spell it out and explain it to everybody on Wall Street, to now have everybody in the world know what this is, it's truly a staggering event in my career. Now, I know a lot of you probably wondering, and I've been often asked, probably the most asked question that I've gotten as CEO of AirTight the last couple of years, is why is AirTight pivoting or expanding its focus from its pure play WLAN security, WIPS focus of the last decade or so into the WLAN market at this point in time? It's a crowded market, there's a lot of competition, many established players. Why enter now? Well, the short and the honest answer is because customers with thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of locations that were deploying our wire security solution from the cloud asked us to do it. I mean, it's very simple, and we found basically a very strong business case to enable WLAN with our security baked into those systems. But it's a more complex answer than that, and there was some real thought behind it. First of all, I remember when we started AirTight back 10 years ago in 2004, many of the venture capitalists and industry analysts thought that when Cisco bought Airspace, that Aruba and all the controller-based players would be dead. That it was game, set, match. Why even enter the market at that point? And of course, you've seen other entrants come into the market, and many players who had been in the market, like Xeris and Ruckus and such, that didn't have a controller, adopted controller-based technology and jumped into the game. Today, it's a $4 billion industry. It supports about 10 or 12 companies, 3 or 4 of which are of substantial scale. And over the next 10 years, I think you can see the trends very clearly. You're going to see WLANs go from a $5 to $10 billion industry to probably something exceeding $20 billion, which is the size of the wireless switch market, of the wired switch market today. The edge of the network is going to be Wi-Fi. Switches will be there to provide, obviously, data center connectivity and backbone connectivity for access points, but the first hop for virtually every connection will be over Wi-Fi locally. And that's the reason I think AirTight believes that this is still early days in the WLAN market, believe it or not. We've gotten to $4 billion in the enterprise, $4 billion in the consumer market. There's probably at least 2 to 3x more to go. So we're still in the early days. The second part of the answer is that if you think about it, one of the dominant trends I think that will drive and that will also benefit from this wave of Wi-Fi adoption will be new architectures. And the new architecture that we're going to talk about today, which is where AirTight enters the scene, is cloud-based Wi-Fi. Right? So we had the FAT-AP generation where the Proxims and Aeronets and Symbols started out. You had obviously the controller generation where the Airspaces, the Arubas, the Trapeze led the way 10 years ago. And now you're beginning to see the emergence of this next generation, this third wave, I call it, of Wi-Fi architectures, which is cloud-based architectures that will supplement existing controller-based technology in the campus, but will really take Wi-Fi to the next level for these highly distributed environments where you've either had no Wi-Fi in the past or very poor Wi-Fi, right? And that would be obviously in industries where you have highly distributed environments, like retail and hospitality, like education, like healthcare, but also into the SMB market, and really bringing, if you will, enterprise-grade technology up and down the stack into every vertical segment. So we really believe we're still not only in the early days of this industry, but that this transition towards cloud-based Wi-Fi is just beginning. And the third part of the answer is AirTight brings some very distinctive technology to the table. So today's session is going to really be about technology, which is obviously the reason we've decided to participate given the technical nature of the audience. But you're going to see some very significant advancements that we've made, some real breakthroughs in a number of different areas. You're going to first see us talk about the ease of management in terms of location-based administration and user interface in our system. You're going to see us talk about breakthroughs in ease of deployment and provisioning. You're going to see us talk about breakthroughs in the analytics, the user analytics, as well as customer engagement that you can use with Wi-Fi systems now. We're going to talk a lot about the very advanced cloud architecture that AirTight actually did in its wire security days back in 2008 when it was called SaaS, We rolled that technology forward now and have very, very mature and a very sophisticated cloud architecture. We're going to talk about breakthroughs that we've made in radio resource management, a field that probably a lot of you think is fairly mature today. It's just beginning, right? There's still so many places you go where Wi-Fi connectivity is not what it should be. And so there's still a lot more innovation to do in the whole RRM area. And finally, we will talk a little bit about our security, although that won't be the focus. In fact, we'll mention it very little today. You're all welcome to ask us questions, afterwards or in other settings, because we could go on for hours and days about our Wi-Fi security and why Gartner rated it the best 6 times in a row. That was our traditional focus, but we have expanded our focus to include Wi-Fi because we believe that our security will play a role going forward, especially in BYOD environments, but it's far more efficiently delivered to the market with our cloud-based Wi-Fi as really the delivery vehicle for that technology. So we'll cover all those different topics today. We are very, very pleased to have all of you here live in person, as well as everybody watching us over the internet. And I want to thank you all very much and turn it over now to Kostub Fanse, our Chief Wireless Evangelist, who's going to basically give you a demonstration of our management platform.